other entities that operate through the NED and USAID are what we call the core groups. That would be the International Republican Institute, of which John McCain is the chairman of the board. National Democratic Institute, which is chairwoman Madeleine Albright. The Center for International Private Enterprise, which is like the International Chamber of Commerce. And the American Center for International Labor Solidarity. So we get to the different sort of political party spectrum, and then business and labor. And then there are a couple new entities that have come onto the scene, again with these noble missions and noble sounding names, such as Freedom House. How many of you have heard of Freedom House? Freedom House, which also operates in many countries around the world, primarily funded by State Department, and have been in Venezuela since 2005. Again, exclusively working and funding groups related to the opposition. Are you going to pass me that paper? Okay. So through these different entities, this is the way that the conflict has been continuously fed in Venezuela. These are the groups that form the opposition. Not all of them obviously receive funding, but if we look at who's getting the funding through National Endowment for Democracy and through USAID and these other groups that work along with them, Freedom House, etc., we see that the majority, the large majority, the 99.9% majority, are groups that are associated and working actively with the opposition to Chavez in the country. We see that over time, this has actually increased despite the fact that we've made this public and denounced it, and despite the fact that technically it is illegal to fund political parties and political campaigns in Venezuela. All of the campaigns that have been led by the opposition have received funding through these entities. It's not even hidden anymore. We know who they are. We know what the most of the money they're getting and what it's being used for. And the same goes for media. There's a close relationship with journalists as well as with private media entities and State Department and these different funding entities. And this has all been proven, again, through documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. The second main area of U.S. aggression towards Venezuela is what I classify as the media or the diplomatic front, which is the use of the international public opinion realm, sphere, to actively and with a very hostile attitude attack Venezuela, but all on sort of a verbal level, although it does get into the diplomatic realm when we look at several sanctions that have been applied to Venezuela. This has been basically since 2005, post-Chávez Code. Gets into why I wrote Bush versus Chavez, which I call Washington's war on Venezuela. Precisely, it is a war, different kind of war, what we call now fourth generation warfare. That may sound scary, but it's real. None of this is Hollywood. It's actually quite real, and we experience and live this every day in Venezuela. A very hostile rhetorical tone that's been presented towards Venezuela since 2005, coming out of mainly U.S. government representatives, State Department. Condoleezza Rice started it. She started it. I'm not making that up. She started it in January 2005 when she announced this concept that Chavez was a negative force in the region. This then became destabilizing force, dangerous force, threat to the region. Then it was John Negroponte repeating it and recycling the same stuff, Donald Rumsfeld saying it, and then it was George Bush saying it himself, if anyone could even imagine him saying something by himself. Well, it was written in the teleprompter, we know that. In any case, we see this as a discourse that over the period now of 3 years has changed from negative force to being terrorist nation, where today, and this is not by chance, this is conditioning public opinion over time period, what we classify or call as psychological operations. So the same thing was done, not to make the direct comparison with Iraq, but the same thing is always done. You demonize the leader, you demonize the country that you want to justify an attack against. And you have to do it through various mechanisms, one being, funding an opposition, what we call subversion, in the country itself, right, to build up turmoil and conflict and keep that going. So from the outside, it looks like the country is in a instability and there's issues going on of insecurity and different things, violence, stuff like that. Then you've got to condition public opinion, right? So over a time period, you start to see Chavez as a dictator, Chavez authoritarian, and even just looking at the Washington Post, which happens to be one of our worst enemies in the case of Venezuela. over and over and over again, using those terms to describe Chavez: tyrant, dictator, authoritarian, despot, even clown. I mean, things like that. Erratic behavior, irrational, crazy, lunatic, all these kinds of things to condition public opinion to make you think that, not you all, because you're obviously conscious and aware and looking to other sources, but the mass majority, and it's true. You ask people out there anywhere, what do you know about Chavez? What do you think about Chavez in Venezuela? If they know, then they probably know because he called Bush the devil, and they saw that all over the paper. And who was demonized? Not Bush, but Chavez. No one saw what else he said after he called Bush the devil and said it smelled like sulfur in the United Nations. No one saw the rest. They just saw that part, and Chavez was demonized. And this discourse has been used to today, for what we see the Bush administration actively trying to get Venezuela placed on the list of state terror sponsors. Right now, and since June 2006, Venezuela has been on a list by itself of countries that don't fully collaborate with the war against terror. And they created that list for Venezuela to sort of put it in the middle between, that's like, you're not quite an enemy, but you're not a friend. And it's a list, that was created for Venezuela to put it halfway because public opinion wasn't ready yet to go and say it's an enemy, it's a terrorist nation. And this list, or this classification, came with a sanction. The sanction being Venezuela cannot buy or purchase arms, weapons from the United States or from companies or countries or whoever that manufactures weapons or arms made with U.S. technology, which are pretty much a lot of countries and companies around the world. And so Venezuela's had to look to other allies, which is why you see them buying, rifles or helicopters or airplanes from Russia and other countries, which then the U.S. says, Venezuela's starting an arms race. But in reality, Venezuela's not even top 5 on the list of Latin American nations in terms of the highest defense budgets, not even top 5. So that, and of course, the U.S. this year, $515.40 billion for 1 year in defense. Venezuela's doesn't even make $5 billion. So where's the threat? And that goes into the third area of aggression, third front of attack of aggression towards Venezuela being the military realm. All these things work together, the funding, the media, the public opinion, the diplomatic sanctions, the other one being for drug trafficking. You've probably all heard that recently too, over and over again, what the individual who calls himself the drug czar, or is it anti-drug czar? Anti-drug czar. Well, we could call him the drug czar, right. John Walters has been, since the beginning of this year, just constantly, in fact, he just said it again a couple days ago, Chavez, Venezuela, facilitating drug trafficking. Chavez is a drug trafficker. Chavez is a drug addict. All kinds of things, because he said he chews on the coca leaf occasionally that Evo sends him from Bolivia. And now he's a drug addict and promoting drug trafficking.